going to be posting it up into the Facebook group. If you're not in there right now, you can go search on Facebook. It's just in parentheses, or in square parentheses, I should say, free group. You just type in female first responders. You should be able to find that group, and I will be posting the recordings of the trainings in there so you can revert back to them, as well as you'll be able to connect with each other, connect with others, and ask questions. Outside of the trainings, things are probably going to come up to you the next day or whatnot. So feel free, go on the Facebook group. You can go through any questions that you see there. So we have Tyler joining. Just muting you, Tyler. We're going to get started right away. And I'll just queue things up and we're good to go. There we go. All right. So like I said, if you guys have any questions or anything, I guess just housekeeping to start. I'll kick things off right now. You can ask any questions or type in the chat box, just chat or in the chat box, just ask any questions that'll come up. They'll pop up. I'll answer them either as we go, or there will be time at the end to go through questions. Once again, this is a day 1 of 5. So today we're going to go through training. That's physical training. Tuesday is going to be nutrition. Wednesday is going to be more mindset, cognitive stuff. Thursday is going to be recovery, and Friday is going to be how to kind of keep that cycle going, how to continue, how to progress, and rinse and repeat so that you build the physical capacity that you want. Okay. Like I said, questions, feel free to ask them as we go, and I will give you contact information and everything after or near the end for you to reach out to me. So I'll kick things off here. Just getting people jumping in last second here. I'm guessing a few people might not have had Zoom downloaded ahead of time. Like I said, there was 94 and there's like 10 people on the call right now. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks again for taking the time out. I know a few of you have been, it's late where you're at. It's, Kaylin, what's it in the UK right now? Like 11? Yeah, 11 o'clock, something like that. So yeah, thanks for staying up late, for waking up early, wherever you are. Appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. It's my goal is to give you a lot out of this call, and we'll kick things off. So let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So we're going to go through the female first responder training. Everybody can hopefully hear me okay. If not, just show in the text box, chat box, but I guess if you wouldn't hear that either. Sorry, there's somebody echoing there. I'm just going to ask you guys to go on mute. There we go. Okay. So we got our training for female first responders. So I run a program called Fit for Duty, and I wanted to build this training. I'll go into that in a little bit, but I wanted to build this training to help empower those who I don't work with and those who I even do work with, just on what's needed to see the athleticism, the progress that you're ultimately looking at. When it comes to first responders, we're going to go through things step by step in as much detail as possible for training as it relates to first responders. So what I'm hoping you guys will get out of it is pretty clear on what you need to do in order to see the progress and the results that you want. We're going to go through on what you need to focus on in order to get true results, the way you need to train to build the capacity to pass any tests. Often the women I've worked with, using a lot of what I'm going to show you here today, typically will either not only pass a test, but more often than not, as long as they're putting in the work behind it, they will outperform the men that they're testing against. And it's no surprise that, yes, there are physiological differences between men and women, but there are certain things that we can do to kind of turn the dials and ensure that you build the kind of athleticism and capacity to dominate any sort of fitness test. We're also going to touch a little bit on equipment with the pandemic and COVID-19 and everything. there's a lot of questions I've gotten over time over the last few months as to like, okay, I have this much budget. What equipment should I get? What equipment is going to be the best for me to, ensure that I pass my training or ensure that I enhance my abilities for a day on the job. It's no secret with everything that's going on right now. Police officers, for one, we have gyms that are shut down, and then police officers are stretched thin depending on where they're located in the world. And so being able to continually build and define that athleticism and that fitness level is super important for all first responders, not just police officers, but especially that. And so when gyms are closed, knowing what you need for equipment wise can be a beneficial skill. So I kind of threw that into this training as a last minute add. When it comes to training, who this is for and who it is not. So this training is for you if you're obviously a female first responder or want to work as a female first responder, whether that's fire, police, EMS, your nurse, military, anything like that. Ideally, you have some fitness experience previously and just kind of hit that point where you've previously seen inconsistent or stalled results. So you're not brand new to the gym. You worked out a little bit, you've researched a little bit, and you're kind of at a point where either A, you're hitting a plateau, you're not making the progress that you want to be making, or B, you are previously battled injuries in the work of gym and you just don't know how to like work around them. Okay, but you do have the desire to develop the strength and endurance, or what I refer to as athleticism and capacity. We'll get into that in a little bit. And ultimately, you want to pass your fitness test, whether that fitness test is to get the job in the first place. So as you know, firefighters, police officers, often military, there are physical requirements, set forth, and you have to pass a test, whether it's a pair or for the Army, they've introduced new ACFT requirements. There's CPAT tests. Basically, there's a fitness test in some capacity for most of these occupations. And so whether you want to pass that or that as a first responder, you're going to be tested in the field to some degree, to some capacity, and you want to be able to rise up to that test and come home each night. I mean, that's ultimately what it's all about. The ones that I've seen and some of my closest friends are actually, police officers and firefighters. And it's unfortunate, but it took a really terrible situation for them to actually take their fitness and athleticism and performance seriously. And what I want is to provide some education so that, regardless of what happens or what, you at least have the knowledge, you have that you need to take your fitness seriously, because that is a big component of the job. And sometimes that can truly make the difference between life or death. And if you don't think so, I would really strongly get you to reconsider your occupation, because it is true. Sorry, I'm just going to mute you guys. Make sure you're on mute if you're not already. Alexis, if you can please mute your phone.
And back to MCW.
All right, I'm just going to mute up my hair. There we go. So getting back to it. With training, that's essentially who it's for and who it's not. So when it comes to, what you're going to walk out of this training, the 4 C's, let me hit back there. The 4 C's and what you need to see better results. So I've broken it down into 4 things that you need to do consistently to see the progress you want to see. We're going to go through the important metrics to build your training around, the best way to train it to get the results that you want. We're going to go through, again, like I said at the end, I'm going to give you access to a 5-day program, which is going to give you a kickstart to where you are building the capacity, the fitness, the strength, the endurance, the athleticism that you ultimately are probably here to see. And we're going to introduce the 5 steps to seeing lasting results. Okay. So why I built this training, truthfully, I've worked with first responders for nearly 13 years to some degree, some capacity, some degree. And overall, I was just frustrated at just the state of when it came to health and performance and fitness. I was frustrated with the state of where things were at. I also saw that there was a huge gap. First responders is no secret. It's a very male dominated occupation. And a lot of the programs, a lot of the things out there were very much geared towards the men that work in these occupations, and nothing was really geared towards the women. One of my best friends, she's training to get on with fire. And one thing she's said often is that, best friend, she's actually one of the ones that stood up at my wedding for me. But she said she feels like she's the underdog. Regardless of how good she is and how strong and physically capable she is, she still feels like the underdog, that she needs to prove herself. And so, being an underdog in all of my athletic endeavors growing up, I kind of connected well with that. And I see female first responders, feeling that way. A lot of them have expressed that to me. A lot of the women I work with, and I wanted to work with the underdog, so to speak. I wanted to prove that, help them prove to themselves, prove to others that they can do this career. I also wanted to just give empowerment, and truthfully, I find joy in working with the women I work with. So just give a little background before that, if you stay to the end, you get complimentary access to the 5-day training. We'll get clear on what you need to see progress, and we're going to go over the proven roadmap to develop your athleticism and career. So who am I? My name's Brandon, Coach Brandon, as some people call me. I've played high competitive levels of golf, hockey, snowboarding, and CrossFit. I've won lots of championships, won lots of tournaments, that and the next thing. I've been a coach and trainer for about 13 years now, predominantly working with first responders, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, nurses, you name it, military personnel. And in that, I've learned lots of things. I've actually, when I was 18, one of my first kind of experiences in the industry, my training partner was actually the strength and conditioning coach at the time for that, the city I lived in, for their, basically their SWAT unit, their tactical unit for law enforcement. And so that kind of kickstarted my career. And I just learned from individuals like that over the years, and got to a point where I was able to then pass those learnings on to other coaches, where I mentored other coaches throughout the country, really. I'm based in Canada, but also just working with coaches kind of all over the globe, predominantly US and Canada, but I have worked with coaches kind of all over. Certified by National Strength and Conditioning Association, my technical strength and conditioning facilitator, corrective exercise, weightlifting coach, tons of certifications, basically all to learn things to help the people I work with, get more out of their training, more out of their endeavors, we'll say. So when it comes to the problems we're facing, problems you're facing as a female first responder, I've kind of narrowed it down to like capacity. So it's different from being unfit, but there's a clear gap in what you can do versus what you need or want to do. And whether it's strength holding you back or endurance or a bit of both, there's this gap you're trying to close, and that's probably why you're here today. So there's a few things that we'll touch on. Like I said, there's physical, which is your training and nutrition. There's your mental, which we're going to cover on our training on Wednesday. There's recovery, which also I would put in that physical. Time is a big one, especially with the women I work with, who work. If you're not a first responder at the moment, you probably work a full-time job and deal with this and deal with that while trying to train, while trying to learn to get the career in the first place. Or if you are in law enforcement or are in fire, depending on your schedule and your family responsibilities and this and that, time is a big struggle. And so I do touch on that quite a bit in my coaching programs, as well as I will touch on that a little bit more in depth on Wednesday when we get into that mental aspect. And knowledge, you've been exposed to health fitness, you've worked out before, but you don't know what you don't know, and you seem to be hitting a ceiling as to what you can uncover. And if you've listened to podcasts at all, I actually record a podcast, and recently we did a podcast where, the big thing that came out of that was training is both incredibly simple and extremely complex at the same time. And you're probably starting to learn that. If you're here today, you're starting to learn that there is a lot more complexities to developing the kind of athleticism or strength or endurance or whatever that you want. And that's why you're here, is to kind of learn those ins and outs. So we'll dive into that. So I'm going to show you how to get to the next level. In that, we're going to start with the 4 C's. So what are the 4 things that you need to do as an individual in order to see the progress that you want to see. Okay. So the first one I've kind of broken down into what the 4 C's are, and that is clarity. Okay. So you need to get clear on where your deficits are or where it is that you want to go. Okay. One of the big reasons why lots of programs and lots of trainers and everything fail is because the individual fails to identify where they want to go. Okay. They don't get clear on what they want their life to look like, what they need to accomplish, what they need to achieve. And so getting that clarity is incredibly important. And so often what I'll do is I'll get an individual to sit down and say, okay, in as much detail as you can provide, where do you want to be? You know, how does your life look different versus today? And we'll usually set that up like 2 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years from now. I find 5 years is really far. We kind of go just in a few months, but getting that clarity is incredibly important, because if you're not clear, then everything, it's hard to get to a destination if you don't know where you're going. And so getting that clarity is incredibly important. And that's something that I can't do for an individual. I will give you the process. I again, can kind of coach somebody through that. But at the end of the day, you need to get clear on where you want to go, what you want your life to look like. If that's to get a career, okay, I want to be, just give you an example of this. I want to get on with fire, for example. Okay, so what do you need to do to get on with fire? Well, I need to train. I need to get stronger. I probably need to increase my endurance. These might be things that apply to you, might not be. But either way, you need to get clear on like where you want to be. So once you get that clarity, that's kind of the first step to getting to where you want to go. But that's not the only step. So the second C that I go through with the women I work with is, whoa, yeah, I gave you that, is the courage aspect. Okay. So I put a little meme there. So there's clarity and then there's courage. So the first step to getting good at something is sucking at it first. And as adults, nobody likes to suck at something. So if you know Adventure Time, that's where this came from. So making sure that you are okay with having the courage to suck at something. Okay. If you're clear that you want to get a career or develop a career, or maybe level up within your career. If you're on the law enforcement and you want to get on to a new unit, whether it's K9 or tactical SWAT, like you need to have that clarity for sure first, like I want to get there. And then you need to have the courage of like, I'm probably going to face resistance to getting there. It's probably going to suck. It's probably going to be hard. I'm probably not going to be naturally good at it. And that's why I say courage is so important, is because very few people are naturally good at things. It usually comes down to, do they have the clarity and the courage to actually take that first step to do it? Okay. And, you know, courage is not necessarily like blindly walking into something, but it's knowing that there is a chance of failure in this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Case in point, a lot of the women I work with have done a CPAT, have done an ACFT, and they've either struggled or failed with it. But they have the courage of, I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to work my ass off from now till when my next test is. And even though I'm walking into that situation again where I've failed, and even though, you know, it's the same instructors, sometimes the same people around you, you know, they're going to look at you with the expectation of, oh, she's going to fail again. And you need to walk into that situation with courage that you're going to do it anyway. You're going to work to pass that test. You know, that's one situation of many, but that courage is incredibly important and something that I think goes severely undervalued or under-recognized that you need to have. So you need to have clarity, you need to have courage. The third C, is you need to have consistency. Basically, it's not loading up, but you need to have that consistency. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to kind of force yourself into training each and every day. Okay. So we'll go into that in a little bit detail in a second or in a little bit here, but consistency is incredibly important. You know, consistency yields results more than anything else. Even a shitty program with consistency over a long enough timeline will yield results. Now, if you're here, chances are you're probably like, well, shit, I'm being consistent, but I'm not seeing the results that I want to see. And that's where the program and whatnot can kind of come into play. But consistency is one of the most important things. And that means, when I say consistency, that means you're going to have days when, it's going to take everything in you to just show up and work out. And if that's the case, that's fine. It doesn't have to be the best workout in the world. You don't have to kill it in the gym each and every day. In fact, most athletes just show up each and every day and they do their best that day. Okay, so consistency is incredibly important. And what I see from the women I work with and people I've worked with over the years is the ones that are most consistent always end up doing the best. Whether it comes to a fitness test, whether it's, a situation on the job, the ones that have been consistent day in, day out are going to be the ones that see the results. If aesthetics, like having, ripped abs and defined shoulders and shit like that, if that means anything to you, if you care about those things, same thing. Consistency is important. If you're like, no, I just care about performance, guess what? Same thing. Consistency is important. So when it comes down to it, showing up each and every day, whether you want to or not, that's what's going to yield the results that you're probably here to learn about getting. Okay. I usually put I don't want to say guarantee, but I usually will guarantee someone like, look, if I work with you for X amount of months or years or whatever, you're going to progress. You're going to get better at it, whatever it is you want to get better at. But if you're inconsistent, guarantee's gone. Like, I can't do it for an individual. So you have to be consistent. And that's why I always say, like, in order for you to see the results, consistency is one of the 4 C's. Okay. The 4th C, okay, is your ability to communicate. So communicate with yourself, communicate with your coaches, with your partners, whatever, in order to see the progress you want to see. Okay. That communication is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. And consistent communication is also going to benefit that. So once you've kind of gone through those 4 C's, once you're, clear, you have the courage, you're consistent, and you're communicating well with the people around you, that's where we get into the nitty-gritty stuff. Okay. Sorry, a little slow internet. So, training for female first responders, when it comes to the physical training side, it should not look the same. Okay. Often I will get women that I talk to that, law enforcement, for example, she is 5'2", 150 pounds, and she works with men who are 6 foot, 220 pounds. Even though the expectation of what they should be able to do day to day on the job is the same, their training to accomplish that should not look the same. You have to do things differently, simply from a physiological standpoint of you're shorter, your hands are smaller, or maybe that's not the case, but generally speaking, like, training for an individual or a type of person should not look the same across the board. When I look at training for first responders, typically, if you read tons of studies and read this, read that, and look at the results of fitness tests from various different occupations for first responders, typically the women will struggle, not always the case, but typically the women will struggle with portions of the test that require a little bit more upper body strength, speed or power, or endurance. I actually use a different word for endurance. I use what's called work capacity. Okay. But typically your training should focus on these areas. Again, it's individual basis, but from my experience over the years, like, the women I work with usually come to me saying, I want help with pull-ups, or I want help with being faster on the beep test, or I want help with being able to, I can do all the things in a CPAT, but I can't get it done in the right amount of time. That's a work capacity thing. And so generally those things are what we want to focus on for female first responders. Again, individuals are different, but when it comes to training, those are primarily going to be the focuses. Okay. When I look at training, it needs to be balanced with what's called unilateral training. Okay. So unilateral means single arm or single leg. Okay. And the reason why we want to focus on unilateral training is if you look at the day-to-day of the job of a first responder, okay, let's take a police officer, for example. As a police officer, you're wearing gear, you're wearing a belt that's typically heavier on one side than it is the other. So if you're spending 6, 8, 10, 12 hours on shift with this lopsided belt, one side of your body is going to naturally get stronger than the other just because it's carrying more weight on one hip. Okay. And you do that day in, day out for a long enough timeline, that strength imbalance is going to increase and increase and increase. And what will eventually happen is you're going to develop a strength imbalance. Most injuries actually happen from strength imbalances. Now, this is not traumatic injuries from an accident or a situation. These are, going downstairs and I, hurt my knee, or I was running and my hamstring starts hurting, or my low back or something like that. And that's usually as a result of a strength imbalance. In sport, we call this contact injuries versus non-contact injuries. Same thing, day-to-day on the job as first responder. If you're not training unilateral training or single arm, single leg movement with the program as a whole, you're probably going to be injured at some point in time. And if you talk to anybody who's more senior, I almost guarantee firefighters are going to complain about sore backs, sore low backs, as are paramedics. You're going to hear police officers complain about sore backs, sore knees, sore hips. Military personnel, it's slightly different, probably something to what I just said, sore low backs, shoulders are a big one. But with military personnel, it really depends on the vertical or the area within the military you're employed within. But ultimately, if you're not putting unilateral or single arm, single leg movements into the training, you are missing out on developing some balance. And over time, you will get imbalance and you will deal with preventable injuries. But if you incorporate your training early on with unilateral training, not to say injuries won't happen, but they are much less likely to happen. Okay, so other things, the important points that you want to build your training upon is looking at mobility is a big one. It's a little different than flexibility, but mobility if you take a joint, whether it's a shoulder, a hip, a knee, or something like that, and you cannot bring that joint through its full range of motion. So, if I look at, I'll maybe blow myself up a little bit bigger here. If you look at a hip, okay, a hip is a ball and socket joint, meaning your hip should be able to move kind of 360 directions. So if you're a little bit, if you hit points where you can't do certain movements because they hurt your hip or they hurt your knee, that's usually a result of a mobility issue. Okay. Annika, thanks for joining. I'm just going to place you on mute. We have a few people that accidentally dropped off and now they're back. So ball and socket joint, you want to make sure that you increase that mobility, because what ends up happening is when you don't work on that mobility, sorry, I'm just finding, here we go, mute all. When you don't work on mobility, what'll end up happening is you will be caught in a situation where you're required to have that little bit of mobility. And as a result, you might hit that breaking point, and that's where those contact injuries start to creep up, is when you don't have that strong range of motion. You're exposing yourself to injury, whether it's on the job or, in a fitness testing position. So mobility is incredibly important. Now, this is a little different than flexibility. When I talk about mobility, it's usually usable range of motion. Okay, usable range of motion that is going to prevent those injuries from happening. Okay. So another thing that your training should include as a first responder, we have unilateral training, we have mobility, sprinting. Okay, this is different than running. When I say sprinting, I mean just that, all out as hard as you can go for a short distance or a short time period. And the reason why sprinting is important for police officers, for example, you have to be able to sprint after a suspect, or sprint after a situation, or you just have to be able to move fast. Same thing for firefighters. Okay. This other also plays into what I'll get into a little bit, which is energy system development. But sprinting, you need to be able to sprint and simultaneously control your heart rate and know where your proverbial red line is. But all too often I will see first responders who think, I need to prepare for my beep test, or I need to prepare for this. And so to improve their endurance, to improve their testing abilities, they'll just go for runs, which doesn't produce quite the results that they're maybe thinking it will. And that's where sprinting can really help and be beneficial. I'd encourage you to Google any Olympic level sprinter. They look probably the most athletic, the strongest individuals, because they're powerful. Okay, this is working on that power. So sprinting, different than running, needs to be included in your program, especially from a mobility and agility standpoint. It helps you be a little bit more agile, and helps with your power output, which can be beneficial in certain situations. If you have to do we'll talk for firefighters or for paramedics, if you're doing a move of an individual, that split second power can be really beneficial. And sprinting is probably one of the best things for helping in the body's ability to produce power. Okay, we'll get into a few things here in a second, but it definitely needs to have sprinting. Okay, and then another thing it needs to have is what's called recoverability. So this is a little bit more detailed subject, but essentially recoverability is, I'm going to give you a task, okay, and you have to do this task as hard as you can. So let's say it's an all-out sprint, and you have to complete this task within a time frame, and then I'm going to give you 30 seconds or 1 minute to recover, and then you have to do it again with the same output. Okay, that's what recoverability is. And so if I look at that from, why you need it is, if you're on a call with fire, you don't know how long that situation is going to play out for. You might be having to, do a particular task on the truck for a long period of time, and it might require you to go hard for a minute, and then you get a minute to rest, and then you go hard for another minute. It might require something like that. And that's where that recoverability kicks in. Recoverability helps with your overall work capacity, or what we touched on earlier, your endurance. Okay. So your program definitely needs to, or your training needs to incorporate that sort of thing. The next thing that we'll want to touch on is your training needs to cover, it's just taking a second to load here, flexibility in training. So this is something I touch on a lot with the clients I work with, but it's RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. But remember I said earlier, one of the 4 C's, one of the non-negotiables that you need to do in order to see progress is consistency, meaning you need to show up and train every day. Now, flexible in training basically works with that consistency, in the sense that you need to show up and train every day, but there are going to be some days that you can't give 100%. Showing up and giving 60 or 70% is all you can do, because you have a lack of sleep, because you're had a rough shift the day before, because of this, because of that. Now, again, you want to make sure we build in some recovery so that happens less often. But as a coach, the last thing I want to do is have one of the people I work with, completely have a murderous workout, and then they have to go and be on point or on the job, 2 hours later. So that flexibility in training, if I'm coaching somebody in person or online or whatever, if they're hitting their workout and 2 hours later they have to be on shift, I might say, hey, you know what, keep this at an 8 or lower, 8 out of 10. And that flexibility is important because of shift work, because of what's required, because of the demands from family, this, that, and the next thing. So there needs to be that flexibility in it. You don't need to kill yourself each and every day, but you do need to show up each and every day. So hopefully that makes sense. But that is something that I find helps you get the most success. Okay. Or the most successful people will be consistent, but also be real with their effort output or their energy levels for the training. again, training typically needs to be done in an hour or less. Okay. It doesn't need to be a 4-hour workout. It doesn't need to be a 2-hour workout. You're not bodybuilders. You're not dedicating your life to that. Now we can still achieve really great results in an hour or less. But if honestly, in my opinion, for first responders anyway, again, everybody's goal is slightly different, but for 90% of the first responders I work with, you can get insane results in an hour or less. If you're going over that, I would argue there's probably some time being wasted within that. Okay. Other training that needs to be incorporated, what's called odd object training. So I know there's a couple people who, I did it again. There's a couple people who work as first responders. You guys can plunk in the chat box below. How many people walk up to a call, doesn't matter what you are, military, police, fire, paramedic, how often is there a perfectly loaded, even weight distributed barbell to pick up? Hopefully the answer is never. I've yet to come across a situation where that is the case, but the reason why I say odd object training is important is it's going to challenge you in different ways than a barbell or a dumbbell or a kettlebell or something will. And so having things like, a bucket that's heavy or, a sandbag are my favorite to train with. Having that separate odd object training is going to be incredibly important to have included in your program so that you can actually see the results that you want to see. Not having that odd object, you could be the fittest in the world, and then you walk up to, let's say a save as a fire, and you have to pull an individual. You have to do a drag. So you have to pull this individual out of harm's way. And then you're used to picking up 250 pounds on the barbell. And then you go to pick up this individual who weighs 200 pounds. So they're 50 pounds less. And you're like, why the fuck is this so heavy? Odd objects and like objects that don't cooperate with you, that don't have easy to grab handles and this and that, challenge you in much different ways than a barbell or dumbbell or kettlebell will. And so if you don't incorporate that into your training, you are going to be facing a situation where you're like, I thought I was strong enough. What's going on here? And you're going to be kind of caught flat-footed in that situation. And that's the last thing you want, especially when seconds matter. Okay. And so in your training, you want to make sure that you incorporate some odd object training. It doesn't have to be all your training. Okay. But it does need to be incorporated into it. I would say on a weekly basis, you need to have some sort of odd object training, just because it's going to get you used to working with heavy objects that are awkward and hard to hold. Okay. And that's going to be important to help you see the progress that you want to see. Okay. Other things that are important to include in your training, it needs to be fun. Okay. If it's not fun, you're not going to do it. If you're not going to do it, you're not going to see any progress. So there's different ways to make it fun. Personally, I like to just, blast my favorite songs and just send it. Other people work well with others kind of in tandem, whether that's, somebody else is following their own program and you're just working out side by side with them, or, you're both following the same program, but your training needs to be fun. And if it's not fun, you're not going to do it. And so I won't go beyond that. I think that's pretty straightforward. It needs to get results. Okay. If you're not getting results, it's going to be hard to stick to a program. Okay. And you're going to hit that proverbial plateau or ceiling, and you're not going to see the progress that you want to see. And as a result, it's going to be hard to stick to it. And again, remember I said it before, consistency is important. So if we're going to be consistent, we're going to get results. So those 4 C's are important to getting results. The other thing is you need to have some progression in your program, which I think is actually the last point that we're going to go here. Is progression means you're going to make each week slightly harder. And then if I design programs, I'm going to pick, 3 or 4 things that we're going to work on. Okay. So I have a group of girls. Right now we're working on their run time. They all want to improve their 3-mile run. And so we're going to do we're going to do some things that are going to help improve that. We're going to also work on strength and things so that they don't get too imbalanced in that way. But the goal with these next 8 weeks working with them is we're going to improve the run time of their 3-mile run. And so picking a few things, making it progressive. So it's, it's becoming harder and harder, or you're working at getting faster and faster in your run. that's going to produce results. It's going to be fun because you're going to see that you're improving. And then every 8 to 12 weeks, you kind of want to pick a few new things to work on. Okay. If you're working on the same things all the time, you will hit a plateau, and we want to make sure that we bring everything up together. It's not just strength. It's not just endurance. It's both. Okay. We want to improve your athleticism. Okay. So I call this the heroic method, which is just a fancy way of saying how we train, or how I train and work with the individuals I work with. But definitely, principles, doesn't matter if I'm training somebody or if somebody takes these principles and applies it to their own things, you're going to see progress. Okay. So one of the hashtags I always use is train athletic. As the adage goes, form follows function. So if you're training for form, meaning if you're training, I want a six pack, I want, nice defined, I want to look toned, I want this and that, that form that you're looking for, that aesthetic, will follow the function that you train in. So if you train like an athlete, you're going to look like an athlete. Go figure. And so when I say train athletic, and when I hashtag train athletic on social media posts and stuff, when I say that, it's to train like an athlete, train with purpose, by training 7 foundational movements through all 3 planes of movement, incorporating all 3 energy systems within the body. So I would write that down. Like, that's incredibly important information for you to have. Training 7 foundational movements through all 3 planes of movement, incorporating all 3 energy systems within the body. If you take nothing else from this training and just that sentence, that will probably put you further ahead than most individuals and most of the meatheads that are, on the departments with police and fire and this and that, who, they might aesthetically look good. If you've ever seen somebody who looks super jacked, but then you put them in a situation that requires them to move like an athlete and they just are flat-footed, are incapable, they're training for pure form. Another way to look at it is like, I train individuals for go, and the show just goes with that naturally. So definitely a very important principle to build your training upon. Train 7 foundational movements through all 3 planes of movement, incorporating all 3 energy systems within the body. So I won't go too, I'll go in detail here, but I'm not going to kill these topics because, I could talk for days and hours, and I want to try and keep this within an hour for you guys. So, 7 foundational movements that I built training off of, and I build every program I write off of, is we want to touch on the ways in which humans move. Okay. So we're going to talk on squat, step, hinge, push, pull, trunk, and jump. Okay. So squat, there's various different ways to squat. There's a goblet squat with a kettlebell or dumbbell. There's a back squat with a barbell on your back. There's a front carry squat where you're hugging a sandbag and you're just squatting. Basically, a squat is a 2-foot movement, a bilateral. So your feet are side by side, 2-foot sit. You're just sitting down without a chair. That's all a squat is. Should be familiar with that. Step is anything that's single leg. I classify these as things like step ups. If for the CPAT, they often require you to either go on a treadmill at an incline, or down in the US, it's very popular to have the CPAT have you spend some time on the stair climber. So that step up is a step. Okay, a lunge is a step. Anything that requires you to move on one leg is a step, or I would classify it as a step within the confines of this definition. A hinge is your traditional deadlift. A hip hinge, okay, is usually, it's shortened down to hinge, but basically anything that requires you to bend over and pick something up. So you're bending at the hip. Now, again, there's some technique things, of course, keeping your back straight, whatnot, but hip hinge is super important. Push is anything that requires you to push away from the body. So that's a bench press, a push-up, pressing a dumbbell or a kettlebell or something overhead. Pull, exact opposite of a push. Okay, I'm going to pull something towards myself. So pull up, ring row, anything like that. Trunk, if you want to write this down, trunk can be classified, it can be subclassified into 3 different types of movements. So there's flexion / extension. Okay, so this is where your body arches or contracts. So think of like a sit-up. Okay, that's a flexion and extension. There's a anti-rotation. So I'm going to keep the body braced. So there's lots of different movements to choose from here, but in simplest forms, this could be a plank, this could be a Palloff press if you know what those are. The other thing for trunk is there's rotation. Okay, I need to be able to twist and turn without throwing my back out. Okay, so that's trunk, but it can be subclassified into a couple different movements there. And then the last one is jump. You have to be able to, as a first responder, you have to be able to move, jump, move like an athlete. I mean, you're required to move like that with, maybe 140 pounds of gear on you. Okay. So those are the movements that you want to incorporate in your training. So when I look at these movements, generally speaking, what I recommend to individuals, if you're not following, program that I'm writing or anything like that, like you should be hitting these at least once a week. Okay. At least once a week with all of these. And then you're, if not twice a week, probably in most cases. Okay. Now the 3 planes of movement, most programs, most people will train in what's called the sagittal plane or the sagittal forward, back, up, down. Most movements you see in the gym are going to be like that, especially if you go to a gym that predominantly uses machines. They treat the body like it works on this, like a robot, really, where all your joints, everything is very forward, back, up, down. That's very popular and easy to build a program around. But especially as a first responder, you have to be able to move in different ways, in different directions. Okay. So simply put, the 3 planes of movement are your transverse plane of movement. So this is your twisting and your turning. Anything that requires you to move on a x-axis. I think I'm getting the axes right. No, that's wrong. Y-axis. Anything that gets you to move in a circular fashion or in a twisting, turning fashion. Okay. So if you turn around, that's transverse plane of movement. Okay. If you jump and do a 180 or a 360 or a spin of some sort, that's transverse plane. If you're doing Russian twists where you have a med ball and you're going side to side, that's transverse plane because you're twisting and turning. Okay. Sagittal, again, very easy, forward, back, up, down. I won't hammer that through. And then your frontal plane is moving side to side. Okay. So you have to be able to move side to side, and depending on your occupation, sometimes in an explosive fashion. So you need to be able to be strong in that movement. And what I would often say, so CrossFit, we'll take CrossFit, for example. It's getting better now overall, but years ago, CrossFit was very forward, back, up, down. And I would see CrossFit competitions of people who trained very forward, backwards, up, down. And then we would do an event. I was competitive in CrossFit. I should precursor that. We would do an event where it would require you to run and then change direction. So you had to sprint in different directions. So it required some agility and it required some change in direction. Well, what ended up happening is I myself, who had trained, we'll say more athletic and more well-rounded because I trained in a world separate from CrossFit prior to getting into CrossFit. But you would see a lot of athletes tear their ACL. They blow out their knee simply because all they did was train forward, back, up, down. Same thing for firefighters, police officers, military personnel, paramedics. If you're not training in these different ways to move, you're going to be caught in a position where you're probably going to get injured, and it could have been preventable had you incorporated this into your training. Okay. So those are the 3 planes of movement. And then if we talk about energy systems, so energy systems is like, everybody's going to be slightly balanced, but the 3 broken out is your ATP PCR. So this is your short and fast workouts. If I look at athletes, or actually let's not even look at athletes. Let's look at firefighters, police officers. So police officers, short and fast, you have to be standing still to an all-out sprint in a matter of a split second. Okay, that's your ATP PCR energy system. Okay, you're a firefighter who needs to drag the hose out, a charged hose. Okay, that's going to require some power output from you, which is going to be reliant on your ATP PCR energy system within your body. Glycolytic is kind of your middle of the road, so this is anything that lasts between 10 seconds and, jury's out, but we'll say 20 minutes. And then anything longer that, is more of a sustained effort, that's going to be your oxidative energy system. Now, where people kind of get mixed up is they're like, oh, I need to be one or the other. They all work in tandem. So if if you're training them all three at the same time, week over week over week, you will get better at all of them. Okay, you will get more powerful, you will get more aerobic. Obviously, if you train more of the long burn stuff, you're going to become more of the long burn, but the sacrifice you're going to make is you're going to be less powerful. So when I look at the day-to-day duties of a first responder, whether you're going in for a fitness test or your day-to-day duties on the job, you need to have both. Okay. And, maybe early on after a foundation period, I might go through with an individual, okay, we're going to focus on this for the time being, but we're going to come back to working on everything simultaneously. But ultimately, they all need to be addressed because they all work together, not separate. Nothing exists in a silo. Okay. So when I'm looking at the training, like those are going to be the things that I want to focus on. So what I'm going to take you guys through to finish up, and then I'll open up for questions. That's essentially how you want to focus your training around. Now, like I said, I gave you guys some, or I'm giving you guys an example program of all that. And if you want to follow it, great. If not, I mean, you're an adult, you're yourself. But what I'll do is I'll get you, if you haven't already, you can write this down or do it along with me, but I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to go through some like setting up your training, and I'll touch on just a couple more principles while we go. So if you download the app Train Heroic to your device, and then download, when it prompts you, use the code FFD 5-day training camp. Okay, that's an important code to keep or remember. So again, download Train Heroic to your device. It's available on Apple or Android, and when prompted, use the code FFD 5-day training camp. I'll email this to you after the fact as well. But if I look at the training, let's, oh, I should have shared that screen. Oh, well. So when you download it, you're going to open up an app called Train Heroic, and just give it a second to connect here. I tested this before the call, and now it's not working. All right. There we go. Okay, so you're gonna have this screen, and I'll just quickly fire through this and touch on a few more principles that you need to be aware of. So you're gonna go through here. I'm just gonna create a quick, I already have an account, of course, but I'll create one. So bear with me here. Okay, so once you've done that, you're gonna hit create account. Now, you're gonna go, I have a coach, okay, and you're gonna hit next. From there, we'll just follow these screens. So this is where you enter that access code. So FFD 5-day training camp, okay? Then I'm gonna hit next. It's gonna ask, are you sure this is the coach you're connecting with? Yes, I'm gonna hit connect. Okay, from there, it's gonna make me pick a start date of my program. So you can pick whether it's today or maybe you wanna pick tomorrow. Okay, and I'm gonna hit confirm. Okay, and then next. And then it's gonna go through, now that we've set it up, we're gonna get you to set up your profile. So you can choose to answer these questions or not. I'm gonna hit just commit to journey next. Do I measure things in pounds or kilograms? Typically, if you're in the UK, probably kilograms. If you're in North America, probably pounds. If you know these things, you can put them in. You don't have to. I'm just gonna leave them blank and hit next. And then it's gonna ask you to create or have notifications. So I personally take the email off, but I like to have the push notifications because it connects with the community. If you message me and I message you back, you get a notification that I've messaged you back. So you can do this right in with the app. I'm not going to put a picture in there. Tour the app. Takes 2 minutes. Highly, highly, highly suggest you do that. I'm going to hit skip for now, but if you don't do it, you're probably going to miss out on a few things that are, I find people who don't do that really miss the boat. So hit tour the app, but I'm going to hit skip and we're going to hit start to training. Okay. So you're going to see the dots above show the program. Okay. Now, when I go into the program, everything's written out in detail what you need to accomplish. So how I've broken this out is I've written these 5 days of workouts with the information I've just given you in mind. Okay. So if you want to take a stab at these workouts, you hit start session. I'm going to hit no. It's going to go through what's called a readiness survey. Answer these questions honestly. Remember I said before, training needs to be flexible. So this is going to help you figure out where you are so that you know what effort you can expect from yourself in training that day. So how was your sleep quality? Personally, I was good. What's my mood? Personally, I'm in a happy mood. Okay. Energy. You know what? I'm a little tired today for whatever reason. Stress, it's okay. And soreness, I'm going to say, just a bit, not super sore. See, my readiness score is 3.4. Okay. So I can expect, a 70% effort out of myself or better, but knowing that I can kind of gauge where I'm at for today. Okay. So read the notes. It says coach's instructions. I would suggest you read those notes in there. And then once you've finished that, you can hit complete. And then you can go through these. Now, the warm up, if you need videos, you just hit the little icon with the picture. It shows movement demos of each movement. So you can find whatever movement you're looking for. And maybe I'm going to, I'm not sure what a Cossack squat is. So I'm going to click on that and then it's going to play what the movement looks like. Now, with each movement, you don't have to look exactly like the video as long as you do your best to look as close to the video as possible. So that you might not get as low as this guy in the video, but your goal is to get as close in and feel, in this particular instance, feel the stretch through the adductors or the groin as well as the glutes and the foot. So that's just one example. So once you've gone through these four or five movements, looks like there's 6 movements. Once you go through these 6 movements, it says complete 1 to 4 rounds. So I'm going to do this twice through. Okay, I'm pretty warm. I'm warmed up. I'm going to get started with my workout. I'm going to hit complete, and then the notes are going to be in there. So sprint 100 meters. So go as hard as you can. Sprint with the push-up start. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to watch the video and I'm going to assume I'm starting from a push-up position. This guy's going to talk a little bit. So I'm going to start from a push-up position, stand up, and sprint out. Okay, so you're going to do a 100-meter sprint starting from that push-up, and I'm going to record how long that takes. Let's say it takes me 19 seconds. Okay, then I'm going to rest 30 seconds to 60 seconds between attempts, and I'm going to keep going. Let's say the second round takes me 21 seconds. Okay, and I'm just going to keep going through. Once I've finished, I'm going to record my fastest time. See, it says up there, record your fastest time to the leaderboard. Hit 4 time. Okay, so my fastest time was my first one. So let's just say 19. Okay. So once I've finished all those, then I can hit next. Then it's going to show, this is where I wanted to touch on. There's going to be a few movements where you're going to see this thing called tempo. Okay, so tempo means, and I've written it out, meaning 3 seconds down, no pause, fast stand, then 1 second pause at the top. So when you're doing a back squat, you're going to take 3 seconds on the way down, no pause, stand fast, and then pause for 1 second at the top. There is a reason for that when it comes to tempo training, and I probably should have put this in before. Tempo training is important because this is going to help you with joint health, knee health, hip health, shoulder health, anything like that. If you're not incorporating that, you do need to be or should be incorporating that into your training. So again, just follow the directions through the app. And if you have any questions, if you notice at the very bottom of the app, there's a little message icon. You can search for coach or just type in my name. That's not showing up. I'll fix that. But basically you can just message me directly within the app. There. Okay. So that is that. Hopefully you got a lot out of some things to build your training on. What I'll maybe do is I'll just open it up to questions now. If there's any questions. No, just awkward silence. Cool. Well, if do you have any questions that pop up, you can either message me within the app or you can email me, brandon@heroicathletics.com. I'll shoot you an email with the access to that training. And you had a question but can't remember. It was writing. All good, Jessica. So if you think of it, you can message me after the fact. You can email me, brandon@heroicathletics.com. I'll shoot you all an email with the follow-up, as well as I'll post the recording of this call into the Facebook group. So make sure you add yourself to the Facebook group, add yourself to the training. And then tomorrow, we're going to go through at the same time tomorrow, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm going to go through nutrition as it relates to first responders. Hopefully that's it. No questions, eh? Cool. All right. Well, that's all I got for you guys. Hope to see you tomorrow. And any questions, reach out. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, ladies. We'll see you later.